Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we believe mental illness can be temporary and transformative. Stay tuned for innovative, effective tools from experts in the field of mental health. Hosted by Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist. This podcast aims to change the narrative around mental illness. Move from a place of fear to a place of hope and solutions. Here on Your Mind.
Kate Duffy, president of Tipping Point Recovery, is an inspirational facilitator and catalyst for change who has inspired growth for over 25 years. She became deeply passionate about changing the language of recovery after facing her own battle with substance abuse. Kate graduated from Lesley University with a BS in early childhood education. Before devoting her time to recovery coaching, she was the founding executive director of Evergreen Day School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She then moved into a consultant and training role in the field of education before becoming a life coach. Kate's strongest skills are engaging individuals, resistant to begin recovery, and in educating families to understand recovery language, causing them to assist their loved one in a more impactful way. Kate trained with Earl Hightower of Hightower Associates and Michael Wilson's CFI, Certified Family-Focused Intervention Training, Bay State Recovery, nationally recognized certified interventionists and facilitators with over 40 years combined experience. So Kate, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you. Tell me, how'd you get started in the work you're doing?
I think of it as the back door. I came in through the back door. Currently, I'm working as an interventionist and a family specialist with addiction. And it wasn't a typical path. I got sober almost 7 years ago. And my background as an entrepreneur, I had a nonprofit preschool and did some life coaching prior to losing control of my own life. And when I got sober, the pull to help others was really strong. But I didn't have a master's as a clinician. I didn't see any opportunity for me. So I did what was recommended and I took a get well job. In my second year of sobriety, I found myself working as a case manager in a detox because the pull was just too strong. My sobriety, I had hit such a hard bottom, and at 50, my sobriety was so important to me, and I felt confused as to why, when I was struggling, I didn't hear anybody talking about recovery. So I really felt strongly I wanted to talk about it. So I took this job in a detox, and the story I'll say that led me to what I'm doing now in that detox was this girl who had been in and out of treatment 7 or 8 times and had a couple of young children. The job as a case manager, I learned quickly, was to sell recovery, because somebody in detox needs a whole lot more than a week or 2 of treatment. And this was what I was doing, was trying to inspire her to do more treatment. And she was having no part of it. And she said, no, my mother said I can go home and stay with her. I'll go to meetings. I know what I need to do. So that afternoon at lunch, I was coming up in the elevator after lunch, and there was a woman who looked pretty forlorn in the elevator. So I said, are you okay? And she said, no, I'm really disappointed. My daughter, Amanda, said there are no beds for her to go to further treatment. And I knew that wasn't the case because I knew her daughter. I didn't say anything. I didn't have any background as in this field, so I knew about HIPAA, but my stomach clenched. I didn't say anything, and I left the elevator, and I went to my boss, and I told my boss, this girl told me her mother said she can come home. Her mother thinks there are no beds for treatment. And the boss said to me, you can't tell the mom the truth. And, I didn't do anything at the time or change anything. I followed protocol, but I'll tell you, that landed in me as something really wrong. And that the mother didn't know the truth. And then the reason it felt so wrong is because I lied all the way to my last day drinking. And I could see that Amanda was actually trapping herself by not telling her mother the truth. So a year later, I took a job as a recovery coach. That I could do. It was a peer-to-peer role. I had some training, I had some experience in recovery, and I was on call with a busy police department in Massachusetts. And every day I would get called from the police department. Somebody had experienced a non-fatal overdose. I would go to the ER to meet them. When I first got to the ER, I was shocked at what I saw happening. Because of HIPAA, the individual who had just experienced an overdose, sometimes having Narcan administered 4 or 5 times, so pretty close to dead, was there, and the nurse would have to ask the patient, would you like to speak to someone? Of course, I can't just walk in the room. But the question they would ask the patient is, do you want help? And 9 out of 10 were saying no. And they'd be discharged within an hour, which also really surprised me. I understand it now to be not the best place for the person to be, and that's where they end up right now. So I looked at the nurse and I said, I don't think you're asking the right question. Because what I know to be true, even though I don't know that person, is no doesn't mean they love their life. No doesn't mean they don't want to get well. No doesn't mean anything other than I have to go right now because of I don't know where my truck is, or I'm afraid my wife saw me. I'm not high and I was, and I need to, use again. That does not mean they don't want help. So I said, could you ask them if they would speak to someone in recovery? Someone in recovery is here. Would you like to speak to her? And we started to see the numbers flip. Instead of 9 out of 10 saying no, 7 or 8 out of 10 were saying yes. I didn't take that as enough, though. I knew 10 out of 10 would talk to me. So I would say to the nurse, if you think they're going to hesitate, as I got to know the nursing staff, I said, why don't you say, there's an addict down the hall? Not one person said no when they described me in that way. And here's the reality. No one, other than someone who's been there, at least with drugs and alcohol, from my experience, will ever deny talking to someone with that experience. So we started to see this huge surge in people being willing to talk to me. Now, the next challenge I had was what do they want at that point? Very few were interested in treatment in that moment. But the majority, I would say 80%, were interested in seeing me later that day or the next day. So how I came to start the work I'm doing now is I was engaging 80 to 90% of people in the ER. And after 6 months in this position, being asked to train clinicians in a popular, well-known treatment facility in Massachusetts by the CEO, called and asked if I would train as clinicians. That's when I started to feel like my higher power was asking me to do something that I really didn't see as an opportunity before. And it took me a while to step into that role, because my first response when he said, could you train our clinicians? I thought, on what? I'm not a clinician. I thought to train a clinician, you had to be a clinician. And he said, on how you're engaging so many people. And that's when I realized the current model or the current approach isn't working. So just showing up as a peer was engaging more people. And the other piece to that really landed me with the work I'm doing and creating now is most of the individuals that I met with for coffee, for a burger, maybe an AA meeting, but more likely just in the community, most of them would ask me within a matter of hours of knowing me, would you talk to my family? And if you know anything about people in this stage of change, they don't usually want anyone to talk to their family, because we're protecting our family from the right to use again, or from the shame or mess that we've created. So when someone says, will you talk to my family? That is gold for their wellness. So my first response when someone asked me was, sure, but I need to tell you something. I'm going to tell them the truth. And that is that we lie all the time. So that's when I could tell if someone wanted to get well or not. I say to people, if you want to get well, you'll like what I do with families. If you don't want to get well and you want to keep using, you won't like what I do with families. Because I tell families, I teach families how to decode their loved one, or people call me an addict interpreter, because I know when someone wants recovery and I know when someone doesn't, because I know what it looks like having been on that side. So I engaged, a numerous 50, 40, 50, 60 family members. And through this grant that I was working as a recovery coach, I started a support group. And after a full year of running this weekly support group, literally just showing up as a recovered person, sharing my story, trying to explain things as best I could to the pain the family was in. One day we realized every person in the room's loved one was sober. And some of them I had met and many of them I hadn't met. And just by the families changing what they were doing, how they were talking to their person, how they were interacting, they had opened a door for their loved one to be able to get sober. And that's when I realized there's something here that's of huge need. So we call it recovery conversations. And it's really a conversation between someone in recovery and the family who's stuck in the dark. And
so you mentioned that that's how you got into the work you're doing now. So how would you describe for me, what is the work you're doing now?
Yeah. So after 2 years of running the support group, I took all my journals and all my notes from those meetings, and I went away for a couple of months. I took a couple of months off and I poured over the material, and I prayed, and I went to meetings myself and I said, what is this? What is this that we've created as a community? And I created 10 principles to teach and guide families. So I do interventions. I've gone back, I threw myself into training with a couple of incredibly well-recognized interventionists, and who supervise and mentor me on doing actual surprise interventions. But what's really close to my heart is working with families over a long period of time, at least a year. And several of the number of families that have been with me for a few years. One of my clients coined it as Al-Anon for the modern day. So I am in no way trying to replace Al-Anon. But what I find with Al-Anon, to answer your question, what I'm doing now is I'm teaching and training families to change the conversation, which involves a few things. It involves really knowing addiction. What's happening in the brain? Why does it lead with denial and lying and justifying? What does it look like? How do I know when my person's presenting as an active addict? Also, then learning how it's impacted you. We all know it's a family disease, but we are not treating it as a family disease at all, in my opinion. And for example, the example I use is if your loved one lost their hearing, would you just keep shouting at them, or would you go learn American Sign Language? You would. And if your loved one had cancer and they said there's a clinical trial, you'd be in the office of the oncologist. The only reason you're not learning recovery language and the solution for the addict is because the addict is telling you it's all fine. So why is that? Why is the person who's the most compromised in charge? And for a while I was nervous to say that, because is this right? I would say, because I didn't have any training. It was just coming out of my heart. Like I'd say to my kids, if I relapse, don't ask me what I want. I won't tell you the truth. What does addiction show up as? Lying and denying. So to me, it's this vicious cycle that ends when the family sees what's really going on. So I teach, coach, the word I'm using lately is I train, I excavate addiction. I pick it apart, and I have families, hundreds following me to learn more. And you know what ends up happening? They start seeing, oh my God, I'm codependent. I'm sick too. But see, I have people that call me and say, how do you get so many families in your programs? Because I'm running a program for codependents. They don't come. And I say, well, I don't make them wait to see that they're codependent. I take them wherever they are. And when they come and they call me and they're upset about their person who's going to die, I'll say, come on in. And it's just like addiction, the family sickness, right? We have to treat it as it is. When I was drunk and went to AA meetings, they let me in. So when a family comes to me in the crazy of codependency or enabling, I let them in and I'll take them right where they are. And, not all of them wake up and say, holy cow, I have become really lost. But I'll tell you, it's incredibly beautiful when that does happen.
So is most of the work you do with individual families, or are you back to doing the groups? What's the structure of your work like these days?
Yeah, thanks. It's pretty new. This past year, I've been writing the curriculum and writing a book, a workbook, and organically teaching families as they show up. So what I'm actually launching at the end of April is the second virtual course. I ran it last year as a pilot, 12-week like this over Zoom course program for families. It's 12 weeks long. Most of them at the end of the 12 weeks want to roll into a longer term engagement. I don't think it should be really cost prohibitive for families to have this work. And an intervention is a big expense, and an intervention they're great. Interventions are incredible, but I want to teach these concepts in very small soundbite ways for families, because there's a lot to teach. It's really a several year process, right? Like early recovery for me took time for me to get better. So right now I'm starting a Facebook group for families who are recovering. This course will be launching. The main words we use to describe it are recovery conversations. My vision for the group that I'll be running is alcoholics and addicts in recovery partnered with families. So a recovery meeting that is for both, sort of lifting the veil of.
So is the Facebook group or these virtual classes that you're doing, are there something you're promoting now?
Just this week, starting to put together. So the Facebook group.
Good. How can our listeners find that?
Yeah, the Facebook group is called Families Recovering No Matter What. And the company is Tipping Point Recovery. So the course will be up on that in mid-April. The course will be available through there at tippingpointrecovery.com. And yeah, I'm literally hammering out the final details to get the program out. We have a couple of experts that will be joining on that 12-week course that will be coming on to teach, that really strongly endorse the work. So I'm really grateful for the people I'm partnering with. And it's a robust program that's at this point will be 12 weeks, but it can grow. That's one of the challenges. I've just decided I could be writing this for 2 more years. It's very organic. It's coming out of conversations with families. What we're doing is we're really creating a whole new language for families. So let me give an example, concrete example.
Please.
Yeah. So you're in a family, and this is just a typical scene. There's a mom and there's a dad, and let's just say the 35-year-old daughter is an alcoholic. The mom and the dad are almost always arguing because one of them wants to help in one way and the other one wants to help in another way. So there's that challenge. They're terrified, angry, wanting to distance. So what I typically see is somebody's either really over-involved, trying to help in a way you would help for any other illness. It doesn't work here. And then you have somebody in the family who's just mad and out I'm done. And then you have the alcoholic who's kind of left alone. That was me, just to self-destruct and cause this chaos. So what I teach families first, there's an assessment period. What's going on? And what do you want? I have to ask these individuals that come to me, what do you want? Some people want their person sober, and some people want to leave, and some people want to not talk about it. So I've got to find out kind of where are they. But the recovery language that I teach, this is really what I was alluding to, that it's the most beautiful. Let me think of an example. The family has decided we've got to stop enabling. So the individual comes to them and says, I'm late for my car payment. Can you pay my car payment? And the family doesn't want to pay it. What the family's used to saying is either yes and not liking it, or no and being angry about it. It's like a punishment. No, because you're doing this, so therefore we won't do this. And what we talk about is having families say something like, that's a great question. I've learned that what I've been doing for you or with you isn't helping me or you. So I'm going to step back and need to really think about that. I mean, that's a teeny example. But what I teach families to do is talk about how it's draining your bank account, not you don't deserve it. You've got a person who's filled with self-hatred. So, because there were two things going on for me at the same time. Lying to my kids, right to their face, knowing I was lying, and then this argument in my head, defending the drinking. So there's a lot of self-hate. So when you have family who we love, even when we're using, mad or scared, you've got fear going on to fear. No one gets well in that case. So I help people reframe. I mean, that's just one example. That's a great question. I can see why you'd ask me. I've been paying it before. I'm rethinking how I do things. Very small example. I'd have to really think, but people send me screenshots of what their people say to them, and I help them reframe it. And what I say when I do that is, let's save that, because we need to teach that to people. So that's what I mean when I say organic.
And what I hear in what you're saying is that's so critical is that if I'm going to move forward in a healthy way, I have to pull out or detoxify the negative emotions. If I act from fear, the only thing fear is ever going to tell me to do,
right,
is some behavior that will let fear run my life another day. If I act from anger and I think I get a good result, then I think I got to get angry more often.
Right.
And I'm pouring negative emotional energy into the field where what I say I want is love and connection and support. And so that's excellent that the root of what you're doing there in that example is just slowing down and refusing to act from the negative emotions.
Yes. There are days I sit and I realize, this is actually applicable to anybody. I'm teaching connection and I'm teaching stillness in a chaotic home. And for example, one dad recently posted, because we have a group for this, for the last course that ran, a Facebook group closed. And the dad said, my son called and I could tell he was working up to asking for help with his bills. Now the kid's sober, but I don't want to pay. So my suggestion to him was, where's your discomfort? And he said, he had a big story he was making up about what might be happening. Well, I'm worried that he's going to need money. I'm worried I'm going to run out of money. So we had him run through what he was worried about. And then I asked him to make a list. This was really eye-opening to the whole group. I said, make a list, 2 columns. What's your discomfort? And what do you imagine your son's discomfort is? So he wrote his son's discomfort. Doesn't have money. He's worried he's not going to pay his bills. And then when he went to list his discomfort, listen to how it sounded. I'm worried he's going to. And I said, no, I'm looking for your discomfort. And he kept referring back to his son. And so the point of that is, we don't even really know where we end and the other person begins.
Right.
And when even just that awareness, so the Facebook group and the group coaching and the teachings allow people to look at it from different angles. the community allows the others to watch this dad, because without the perspective of watching someone else, you think you're the only one. So it's far beyond, though, others are saying, oh, I'm going through that too. That feels good in a group. But in this case, people were able to see, oh my God, I do that. And he was able to say, and then he looked back at his writing, and I said, your discomfort's not in there. How is that making you uncomfortable? Oh, it's so beautiful when you watch that light go on. So it's far more than intervention. It's really personal development. It's spiritual work. It's mindfulness. It's very organic. And you know what? I'll tell you, I don't want to do anything else. And I will not do what doesn't work. That is a fact.
Well, I applaud you for that. One of the hallmarks of my work for years, beginning as a probation officer, was I want it to be practical. I want it to be results oriented. And I got lucky early on, and somebody said, you know what? Things tend to work out better if you keep your eyes open and observe rather than try and make it work out the way you think it should.
Good advice.
You're acting from a belief or a dogma, so that sounds like what you're doing. Currently, how many interventions are you engaged in, or do you do, or how do you get the word out about that?
Yeah, so I will say, I started this business not wanting a business in this field. I was afraid. I was very respectful of my own recovery, and this is a pretty draining work. So I knew you can't deny the higher calling. I knew I was to do this, but I wasn't quite sure how. So I've just been taking it slow for the last year and a half. I've done 17 interventions in the past year and a half in the surprise intervention way, in the family systems model. I would say I've worked with 100 families in the last year and a half through the free groups or courses that I run. And is that what you asked me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the current direction that I hear you're going in is more to be able to make what you do available to more families at a lower cost.
Right. And so I knew right away a year and a half ago, I don't want an office in a community and have the people that can drive to me be who I see. Because what I could see happening was, I feel like I was closing gaps in the path. In the first 6 months of someone's recovery, there are many gaps, big gaps, where people fall through. And I could see that some of the things I was doing in my way of engaging people and their families, where it was closing those gaps. It's needed across the country. It's needed in the world. So I decided everything I've been creating can be offered virtually, because I want to have a wider reach. I'd like all of us in this field to be using this methodology, which honestly, I didn't think was anything unique. But what I'm seeing is, it is. Not that I'm unique, but I'm not seeing people. I don't know. You'd have to tell me what you heard I'm saying. But to me, it's surrounding the person that is most struggling with people that are getting healthy, so that they can help the person get healthy. Because sick can't heal sick. And I think we can make this happen in all industries if people learn to have a conversation that is compassionate. And it's not about just being understanding of this addiction or mental health issue. It's looking within and really exploring how you've become sick as a result of being around addiction for so long. Not everybody's willing to do that.
Yeah, I used to tell people, even if you lived with somebody who was wheelchair bound as your roommate, spouse, whatever, for 5 or 6 years, and then whatever happened, that situation changed, and now you're living with an able-bodied person, you have some relearning to do. Because the able-bodied partner you have is going to get upset at the dinner party where you reach over to cut their steak for them.
Mm.
And so you don't think you have a problem because you've lived with an alcoholic or your parents were alcoholic or etc. And yet you have some relearning to do.
Yeah. That's a big piece of what we're doing is relearning. There's no doubt. You're right. Good point.
The other thing that I work with people so much and try and help them understand is that so many people that end up in my office really want to help somebody else. And that's it's a very noble desire. What they don't understand is that 80% of whatever anybody learns from them is going to come by watching how they live their life. So unless they can get on a healthier pattern, unless they can get more honest with themselves and those around them, they can't reach their goal. They can't achieve their goal of being of assistance in somebody else's pattern unless they've corrected their own.
One of my favorite ways to get to the root of that, and I've learned, I didn't ever think I'd be doing this, but I'm pretty bold and I ask permission, but in a case like that, I would use what I take from one of the fourth step that I've learned through AA. And that is I'd ask why 7 times. And the person pretty quickly comes to why they want that other person to change is because of their discomfort. And so then I say, now I can help you. Because other than that, if the other person's not here, it's going to be really hard for me to help them. And, not everybody's willing to wake up to that. But,
So you've got some company back there.
There's another one. Yes. So
what is it that we haven't even talked about yet that you would like our audience to know about, either what you do or where you'd like to take your business?
So something as I'm getting ready to launch this course that I've done that I think it needs to grow, I decided to reach out to the 20 or so people that I know I've helped that are doing really well. And we gathered over a Zoom meeting last week, and they very much want to tell their story with their family members. So how they started their recovery journey by having their family know the truth. And they very much want to help other families. So I think that is such a win-win-win, because in recovery at any stage, one of the ways we stay recovered is by helping others. And it's really frustrating when you're trying to help an alcoholic or an addict and they keep falling. It's really hard to keep trying. When you can help the family who's pretty willing to get new direction, this mushrooming is happening. So what I've done is I've created a mentorship program that's going to run alongside of the family program, because I really need an army of recovered people to help teach the families this work. So it felt really early for me to start mentoring people because I'm just starting to get the family program launched, but I realized they need to go together, because it's us, the recovered people, that are teaching these principles. So that is an area that I'm really looking forward to growing, is people in recovery who want to help others and their families. And my dream is, so in AA, we have closed AA meetings and we have open AA meetings. A closed meeting is you have to identify as an alcoholic or an addict. I'm sure you know this. An open AA meeting, anybody can go to. One of the first things I say to families when they come to me is, go to an open AA meeting. People don't recommend that often, and people are pretty nervous. Well, won't I feel weird, and won't they be upset that I'm there? And no, they're always widely welcomed. My dream is for wide open AA meetings, meaning we just all recover together and everything's on the table.
Yeah, that hits the idea of the truth being the light.
Yes.
That, does the healing. And,
Yes.
the age-old adage that it's my secrets that keep me sick.
Yep.
And the mechanism for that, as I understand it, is that whatever amount of mental energy I have to put into hiding a secret from anyone, an equal amount of that energy is feeding the conclusion in me that I'm
Bingo.
damaged, broken, and unlovable. And
Bingo.
if this person finds out what I'm hiding from them, they're going to do one of two things equally evil. One is attack me, the other is run away from me.
Bingo. Right on.
And so the more I shine that light of truth and open things up, the better things get, which of course, as you talked about before, you mentioned HIPAA, and maybe some of the people that are listening won't know what HIPAA means, but it's that Health Insurance Privacy and Portability Act that mandates so much secrecy in medical and mental health that unless we can get people to move past that secrecy, one of the primary mechanisms for keeping us stuck in our illness stays in place.
So I feel like HIPAA in addiction is protecting the addiction. It's all
Exactly.
So I've been in conversation. So when you say, where else would I want this to go? If we kept talking, it would just keep getting bigger. I've been talking to a few CEOs of treatment facilities because I like to push back. I want to ask questions. For example, I might find treatment for an individual who then signs a release of information. They can talk to me, their staff, and then they might pull that release. And I call and I can't talk to them. And I know family does that. So I might drop my husband off at treatment. He could change his mind, take me off the list. I call the next day and they tell me he may or may not be there. So the treatment facilities CEOs know that's a problem. But one of the solutions would be, okay, you have to protect, because that's in place right now, that law. We have to protect the individual. But because we know it's actually not protecting the individual, why don't we then put the family on with someone who can teach them about addiction? Maybe they don't have to confirm if the individual's there, but let's refer them to maybe this program or a program like it that actually says, these are the things, not just these are the things you need to look out for. This is how addiction speaks, and this is how recovery speaks. This is what recovery looks like. That would be amazing.
Agreed. If you can plug the family in, even if the identified person as the troubled person or the addict or the one in a mental health crisis, even if they decide to pull out, the family can still get educated, learn tools, and move toward health.
That's right.
And as you said, then if they're surrounding the person with the greater need with more and more healthier people, there's a greater possibility for healing to happen.
That's right. That's right. And that is the goal, really, Dr. Hayes. That's the goal for me, is long term. I'll work with people for as long as I need. Because, in my early recovery, that's how it was. We don't turn people away. So I don't want to turn people away because they don't see their problem the same way I see it. It's sort of humanity to me. It's a humane way to serve. Is I'll keep talking to you. I'll keep showing up because it's a process. When someone tells an alcoholic, just stop drinking, that mirrors the family member when someone says, just stop enabling. We don't just stop anything that quickly.
Whether it was in this conversation or a previous conversation we had, you alluded to what so many of us in the field understand, is that there's an underlying pain that's driving me to my drug of choice.
Right.
And when the underlying pain is gone, there's little or no attraction for that drug of choice. And if we aren't busy helping people identify and resolve their underlying pain, we aren't really providing a solution to the addiction problem.
Right.
Or the mental health problem.
Exactly. And likewise, family are trying to control or obsessively worrying because they're trying to cover up pain, their own pain. Someone I love is dying and I can't do anything about it. So does the work I do guarantee someone gets sober? Absolutely not. But I can tell you so much. You have like a 10 to 20 times greater chance of helping your person when you're more whole. So why not spend your time getting better and helping them along the way in a new way.
Well, and the other real powerful thing about that is that as long as I'm focused on somebody else getting healthy, I'm focused on things I have no control over. But as soon as I turn and focus on myself getting healthier, now I'm focused on something I have control over. I feel more in control.
Yes. Conversations around you just change as a result because you're changing the dance. Yeah.
And that's the key that I learned many years ago now, probably about 40 years ago, 45 years ago, to avoiding absolute burnout, absolute irreversible burnout. And that is when I was told by my supervisor at the juvenile hall that it's not my job to make these kids healthy. It's my job to just show up and be responsible, firm, honest, loving, respectful, and put in my 8-hour shift. And if I do that, I'm going to be perhaps one of the only adults in that kid's life that's doing that. I'll model good behavior, and I won't go home with the burden of upset when they relapse.
Right. Right. So that's fantastic because the burnout's real, right? Burnout potential is so real. I have had months where I thought I was in control of everything. I joke and say, I did think I was God for 1 month, and that took its toll on me. There's no doubt families can really identify with the overness of what they try to do. We talk a lot about if you really practice a faith, you can learn and know it's actually not my path. How do I know what their journey is? Right? When you talked about cutting someone's food, right? Over helping someone who doesn't need the help. It made me remember one time with a group of families at a table in a conference room, it occurred to me that every single one of their loved ones, myself included, so the alcoholic, the identified individual, was treated differently from a very early age. We are treated like we can't. We are usually the one in the family that has siblings that excel, and it might be subliminal, it might not be overt, but we are the ones people thought early on they needed to help more. So there's this over helping, which gives us the message, I probably can't then. Because I remember getting sober thinking, I don't need help. Thank you so much. People wanted to help me lovingly, but it was disempowering me. If people were giving me things in my family, it taught me I didn't need to do for myself. So I had that thought when you mentioned that. Yeah.
Well, I deeply appreciate your taking this time to talk to us, and I would love to keep informed about how this series of projects you're launching moves forward. I look forward to the book. And would you mention for us again the name of the company and the name of the Facebook group?
Sure. The company is Tipping Point Recovery, so tippingpointrecovery.org. The tipping point being the family having the truth is really the precipice at which someone has a better chance for success. And the website, Facebook group is Families Recovering No Matter What. Families can recover no matter what. And then when they do, their loved one stands a whole lot better chance.
So if people go to Facebook and type in Families Recovering No Matter What, will they get an open group? Do they submit a request for membership?
Yes. They will be asked to answer a couple of questions, and it's a closed group. It's private. It's public for them to see, but what happens inside the group stays inside the group. So they'll be asked a couple of questions, and then the administrators will see if it looks like a fit, and they'll be invited to come in. And in that group is a lot of good content, a lot of free content, videos, and a really supportive community.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for what you do and for taking the time to share with us here today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
A pleasure to know you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Likewise.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.